at every phase of the sales process, there's documentation to be had. Early on in discovery, we want to know pain. Are we documenting what is the pain, and is it a technical problem we can solve?
Welcome to Altar of the Demo Gods. If you're wondering what advice from two experienced sales engineers sounds like, it's a little like this.
Welcome back to Altar the Demo Gods. I'm Keith Wilson, joined by my co-host, John Morton. John, how you doing this evening?
Ahoy, hoy, Keith. I was trying to figure out if maybe there's another way we could say that in another language like Japanese or Spanish. But anyways, ahoy, hoy.
Ahoy, hoy, indeed.
Maybe there's another way to translate it. I'm going to have to ask ChatGPT.
Yeah. We're finding that more and more useful for the podcast as it goes on. We're going to... John thinks a good use for it is to figure out new ways of saying ahoy, hoy, which it could be. Actually, that's not a horrible use case. What are some new catchphrases we can toss out on the podcast that we can put on a shirt? Let's see if ChatGPT can do that.
Yeah, build us some shirts that we can sell that. Translate.
I've fed ChatGPT enough of our transcripts that I bet you it could come up with a good catchphrase for us. That would be fun.
Now that would be, you got my gears turning, because I do think that would be fun.
I mean, a lot of them are going to be crappy and misguided, but there could be one good one. Like, that's one of my tricks to ChatGPT. Like, if I need a title for something, like if I'm trying to figure out a title for a course, for an online course, I'll tell it to give me 10 suggestions because I know the majority of them are going to not work at all. But there may be like one or two good ones in there. I'm like, those are, or one that I just need to change just a little bit, right? I almost use it as like a brainstorming prompt.
That's a good idea. I mean, now I'm picturing something else, because when I picture ChatGPT, I picture like linear. Imagine if it had little bubbles that popped up visually. Brainstorming activity. I think we're onto something here, Keith.
You mean like create a mind map? I think you could have it do that.
Well, as it's like talking to us or to you, right?
We're not
like,
too far.
Keith,
we're not too
like
far
me
away.
to brainstorm on, and it's like, here's a couple things, and then you just
we're not far away from that. Well, honestly, we're not. I think ChatGPT or GPT-5, right? That's supposed to be the next big iteration. I have a feeling, this is complete speculation, but I have a feeling that's going to be more closely aligned to like what you're talking about, right? Like, hey, I need you to create a mind map for me. We're going to do a brainstorming session. You have a conversation with it, right? Because the conversational AI already exists in ChatGPT. I've got the what is it, the 4.0 model is the one with the voice recognition and the voice conversation. So it's already very conversational, right? It's just a matter of expanding its functionality to be able to do things like create a mind map instead of just generating an image with horrible text, right?
Yeah. I mean, I don't think the text is that horrible, but I see what you're saying.
So last episode, we were talking about culture. So some of the main points that we talked on there, culture is something that should be set from the top down, but there's all sorts of things you can do at different levels of the organization to promote a positive culture, because a positive culture is a culture that higher retention rate, has happy employees. Generally, the customers can see the positivity that comes out of it as well. So if you're interested and want to learn more about affecting a positive culture at work, hop into our last episode. So I think this is episode 42, or 43. Like I don't know if this matters. I mean, it is in our titles, so I guess it helps search. But if you go back to episode 42, talked about culture. Actually, you know what? As we're discussing this now, I don't know why I didn't think about it before. I have the perfect guest. She's a recruiter, and she's She has a lot to say about culture. I think she'd be great to have on. So we're gonna have her on sometime. I haven't asked her yet, but I know.
I like that idea. We haven't had a recruiter, I don't think, ever.
Yeah, and this is one that I respect. There's a lot of recruiters out there that don't do it the right way, and I'm sure there's any that hear this right now are like, I do it the right way, and you probably do. But there's a lot that don't do it the right way, that cast a wide net, right, for a very specialized job. And just, or, maybe I'm looking at it wrong, or they just, they do a whole lot of things that aren't right, but she does. So I want to get her on. John, did you have anything from last episode that you wanted to reiterate or hit on?
Yeah, just again, culture is critical to everything, man. Like in the best times and the worst of times, your culture will get you through everything, no matter what stage of business, startup, more, seasoned, 300-plus-year-old postal service, whatever it may be. Culture is the key, and your people make up that culture, and understanding them is the driver. So simple things: praise in public, coach in private, right? Those sort of things go a long way. Plus one-on-ones that Keith mentioned, all good stuff.
And then my favorite part of the cultural conversation was the conversation we had on cartoons. As I'm again this week wearing the same DuckTales T-shirt as I was last week. Hey, you got it. You got it. Oh man,
what was his name? The pilot, not Crash. In DuckTales, he was the helicopter pilot, not Crash. Anyways.
Yeah, I can't remember his name.
I set your mind on a loop.
Yeah, if you're listening,
he's right there. He's the guy with the glasses on in your shirt.
I know, and
that's Gizmo. I know Gizmo Duck, Scrooge McDuck.
We're too lazy to look him up.
I know. Yeah, we'll be all right.
Yeah, we'll be all right.
We'll be all right.
Anyways, good conversation for the culture. Again, if you missed it, go back, listen to last week's episode. Shifting gears on this week, we're going to talk about a subject that's near and dear to John's heart, because I just listened to him complain about it this afternoon, and that's the importance of documentation in sales engineering. And John, this is a painful thing for you. We're gonna see what we can do to make it a little bit better for you.
Thank goodness.
Through this episode, let's see what we can do to make documentation a little bit better too. You recognize it as a problem, but you also recognize it as something that's important in in sales engineering. And why is that? First of all, talk about. I want you to. It's going to be deja vu because we did this earlier, but I want you to talk about the documentation that sales engineers are generally expected to keep. And then as part of that, if you could kind of tell the listeners the importance of why those different things are important.
Yeah, so when it comes to technical sales, there's a couple of key things we want to talk about. So at every phase of the sales process, there's documentation to be had. Early on in discovery, we want to know pain. Are we documenting what is the pain, and is it a technical problem we can solve? Sometimes that includes various things like, what does the customer's environment look like, right? Even if you're selling cars, what kind of car do they have? Is it a Ford? Is it a Toyota? Are they concerned about tires? What size tires, right? Are they concerned about gas, engines? There's all these things that we want to document to help us articulate what pain we're trying to solve, and if we can even solve that problem. So collecting these details up front, and we do more in software, similar things, is very important for any CRM solution where we're tracking this deal. On top of that, there may be notes, right? They may say very explicit things. My pain is XYZ. If nobody documents that, you're wrong. If all me and Keith do is ever talk and nobody ever wrote it down and turned it into something actionable, we're wrong. Not because, we can't take the deal across the line, because other people are depending on that data. Everyone else in our organization is reliant on this documented data. Can we satisfy the requirements of what they want? Do we know how to support them going forward?
Well, let's pause there. I want to use documenting pain as an example of why it's important to the entire organization, right? If you document pain, it's obviously important to sales, because that's how you're going to win deals, is fixing customers' pain. But it's also important to marketing, so they understand what pains your customers are having, because if you have one customer that has it, there's probably others out there that are having the exact same pains.
Yep.
And if the customer can articulate those pains to you better than your marketing people know how to do, which they probably can, then that's great documentation for them. Product development, product planning, trying to manage your product and figure out the roadmap for it. It's all understanding what all of these pains are that keep coming up. And it can be harvested, but it can only be harvested if you document it.
Yep.
All right, go on. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no. So keep.
I want to hit on
point.
that example.
I always need the balance because I start to run off. Sometimes my one of my old bosses used to say I got diarrhea of the mouth. I always thought that was a unique thing. But anyways, back to the point. There's tactical. Tactical means we're working on this deal. I have to document everything about it for my personal paycheck, W-2, whatever, me and my team. As a technical seller, these are tactical things. But to Keith's point, there's strategy. If we are documenting these things and archiving them, and we have some sort of, I'm going to use a very high-level term, but it's simpler than that, data science to analyze, to Keith's point, recurring themes about recurring problems, strategically as an organization, we can start develop more messaging, better solutions to this recurring content. And that all comes from that core, and this sounds bad, but ant level documentation. We're collecting the data in our sphere of influence. And then sharing that higher up so we can do both tactical things and strategic things. Make sense?
Yeah. I've always taken the approach to any job I have of making myself replaceable. And I know that people get worried about that, of like, oh, you make yourself replaceable. That just means they can stick somebody else in your position. Like, no, you're missing the point. I document what I do. So I'm replaceable in the sense that you can take my documentation, give it to somebody else, and within a couple weeks, they can get up to speed on my job. But that person's probably not going to continue to do that documentation, right? It's rare that people document what they do. And that, that can be part of your just kind of, it's part of your work, your professional work, but your sort of personal things you do to improve is documenting, all sorts of different things, and then trying to find a way to, I forget where I was going with this thought. Man, we keep recording.
No, that's okay. Because like in that same vein, like, and I was thinking about this is a little bit radical, but that's why people enjoy our show. You know what's awesome about documentation that I've noticed emerging lately, and we alluded to it earlier, is the greater the data set, the smarter the AI. So even though you may think, oh, somebody's trying to replace me, kind of like Keith's worried about, what if you turn that around? What if you said, what if I took all of this document data, even my own, and I coached my own AI, Chat GBT, on the knowledge I already documented? It needs that. You're not going to sit down and tell it every day, hey, blah, blah, blah. If it can read these things and we have this data set of documented data, it can also help you. So just kind of a positive spin on what Keith's saying.
So I think I remember the point that I was going to make, and that's, if you document what you do, you can stand back now and look at that documentation and go, okay, well, this is working or this isn't working, and then figure out, like, if you're documenting policies and procedures, right, for your job, you can build a playbook of things that work and don't work for yourself that will, if you build it for yourself and make yourself successful, and you have this playbook already, sharing it with the organization puts you in a really good position, right? Because you can go to your leadership and go, hey guys, I've been working on this for a while. This documentation of how I sell and what my process is. And I've been documenting of what works and what doesn't. And this is what I've distilled it to over time. Hopefully by that point you've had some success. So you can back it up now, with this almost framework that you've created on your own, and say, well, yep, my success has been a result of this, and I'd like to share it, with the team, right? So being able to do that is huge. If you're doing your own personal documentation, being able to expand that to your team. But yep, if you don't have anything, if you don't have policy, procedure, or anything like that documented, then you're gonna have a hard time. You got to start somewhere.
To Keith's point, right?
Well, hold on.
Yeah, good.
I want to give a tip right here to make documentation easy for you when you're doing policy procedure documentation. Record yourself, do a screen share video if you're walking through doing something, and narrate and say exactly what you're doing. Then get a transcript of that. And now you have the video, which you can post and show to people so that you have documentation and video. But then you also have the transcript now that you can take, and transcription software is cheap or even free. Like there's plenty of transcription services out there that you could take that and then use that as your copy paste written documentation. It makes it so much faster, right? It's so much easier for me to talk somebody through out loud the steps of doing something, and instead of writing it out first, talk through the steps and then have the transcription software kind of clean it up for me.
Yeah.
So that's a tip I want to get out. I'm sorry, John. Go ahead.
No. I wanted to just kind of like double down on that, because when you think about data too, like to Keith's point, if you have a structure about what you're trying to document, we don't want just one blob, one meeting. Here's everything in one blob. There could be a cadence to it, right? Like meeting number 1, discovery. Here's what I collected. Here's their environment. Here's these things. And it's over time. What I'm trying to say is, like, even for AI, it can't learn from like a flat blob. I had one email, go read the email AI and figure it out. And I'm using that as an example. I know it may not be pertinent, but collecting data in the right places as well, like constructing documentation of data that's relevant to what we're trying to do is also important. And that's where, to Keith's point, I was complaining earlier, it's not easy. You can't just roll it out like, go collect XYZ and it'll always work. It's kind of an evolving process. We want to refine it as we go, document everything we can, but document it in a way that makes sense too. Like, Keith, question for you. Have you ever tried to read someone else's handwritten notes that they scribbled? I mean, I can't do it, dude. Like, they wrote it in their mindset, in their own way.
I have a hard time reading my own handwritten notes sometimes.
So we want to have a structure around what we're doing, you know?
Yeah. I'm trying to think of some of the other documentation. So actually, we've talked about this before. POC documentation is huge, right?
Yeah.
Because you want to set the scope of the POC, and you want to get agreement on that scope. And we've talked about this in episodes on negotiation before. I think we talked a little bit about this, but you want to make sure that you've negotiated a scope of, what exactly we're going to do in the POC, because you don't want it to be this, well, we're just going to use the product and for this indefinite amount of time. We're going to do these specific things. You want to document what the goals are and how those relate back to the business objectives and the pain that you had that you've been documenting since the beginning, right? Documentation in the CRM and throughout the process helps you tie this thread throughout the entire process that you can keep pulling on as you go back to conversations with the customer, right? And it culminates when you're doing your POC and you go, okay, well, you said these things are important to you. These are the pains we're going to solve. So in order to prove the value, prove that this will work for you, we're going to do these, whatever the use cases are, but they're well documented, right? And if you got to start with those to begin with, right? So make sure you keep a collection of these too, because you can recycle them. So little tip there. And you can and not recycle like the entire thing. Like you can make it modular and recycle just parts of, different goals, because different customers will have same or similar goals, right? Or use cases. So you can have this bank of use cases that you can always include in this POC documentation. But that's going to guide you for the POC. It's going to set the scope. It's going to set the rules of engagement so that when you're all done, you can go to the customer and you can say, okay, I think we've proven everything that we agreed to. Is that correct? And they can, agree to it. Or they can come back and try and push it out of scope, and then you run into this whole problem with scope creep. But you're much less likely to run into scope creep if you document it on paper and get agreement to it up front from the customer. Even better if you can get a signature for it. I don't know how, it's not like it's legal, like it's going to stand up in court, but it does, it's kind of like signing a pledge, right? It almost makes you feel a slight bit more committed to it.
Yeah. And to that point too, one thing I like to talk about is an artifact. right? Documentation, especially in a POC process, is an artifact that lives forever, right? And if you get screenshots of proving out these use cases and you have the customer agree to it and it's their email and they're doing the demo, right? It's insane, right?
It'll save you time.
Documentation goes a long way.
It can save you time in the future too, right? Say you've done all this work on the deal, you've come to the POC, and then for some reason out of your control and the buyer's control, budget goes away or gets moved or whatever, and the deal gets stalled and or killed, right?
Right.
Now, if they have to pick up the deal a year later, 6 months later, whatever it is, you've already agreed to buy, you don't have to redo everything. You go, oh, yeah, we already documented all this stuff, and they have the proof that they need to justify the purchase, right? Some people are going to try and force a POC, but most of them will accept just taking that. If it's good documentation, they'll just accept taking that, and it'll save you some time from having to rehash and go through all this.
Here's the key too, man. I can tell you this definitively. I'm actually getting excited about it. Anytime I've gone into a sales opportunity, whether big deal, small deal, if you come as a technical seller and you come prepared and you help the buyer, you literally help them. I am shocked how many deals get done without this, where you're saying, if we document XYZ, I can help you build a business case. We can show you we satisfied your use cases. You can take this forward and help sell it internally. You're taking stuff off their plate. You're helping them buy your product. So even that very framework of documentation and basics, when it comes to the end of the day and your competitor doesn't do that, they're the big fish in the pond, or they're just selling off the cuff, shooting off the hip, they're going to fail compared to you're ready. You're there. You're making my life easier as a buyer because you documented everything for me. It's crazy, man. Crazy,
yeah.
Keith.
Yeah. I mean, POC documentation, all the other documentation. Like I said, the documentation that honestly before this POC documentation, for the most part, is internal, right? So it's notes that you're keeping so that you can eventually create this POC agreement or document or whatever you want to call it. But yeah, it's not everybody does it, and I'm not sure why. But yeah, it's super helpful.
Maybe and just don't know, Keith. Maybe that's where we're here to help them.
Well, I mean, and like you said, you're reducing the friction of the sale, right? I'm assuming that the guy running the POC wants to buy my solution because he believes it's going to fix his pain. He needs to convince the guy above him to cut a check for it. He's going to do that with my documentation.
Yep.
Right. And
it's way. Yeah.
And I've just, by doing it, I've saved him hours of time. It doesn't take me hours to create that documentation, by the way, because I do it all the time and I have templates and all these different things saved. I can do it quickly. But for him, he'd be starting from scratch, or her. They'd be starting from scratch trying to create this report and justification for their management when you can just provide them with the presentation.
That's why I like to call it an artifact, right? Sometimes it's like the Rosetta Stone. We did all the work. We helped you translate. We helped articulate business value. We've done everything for you, and all you have to do is present it. Just help us fill in the blanks as we go along in this documentation. So we're collecting that all the way through the sales process. I'm telling you right now, definitively, all the success I've ever had has come down to that. And technology's evolved. I mentioned this, Keith, earlier. Before, I used to use a lot of PowerPoints or, spreadsheets. And now there's things like Monday.com and different software that can help us track this and do it. But the end result's the same. It's an artifact where we've successfully documented, here's your pain. Here's the before scenario. Let's do a POC. Here's the after scenario where we demonstrated we can satisfy these requirements. Here's the artifact to go forward. It's that. I like to say that easy. It's a lot harder than that, but it's that easy.
Yeah. So one of my early technology jobs was doing technical support for internet security systems for the internet scanner product. I don't know if you ever got to use that. It was a vulnerability scanner. It was one of my first real security jobs. And in that, I learned to document because other people may pick up my ticket. And I've I worked with a range of people that had varying knowledge levels of technology. And I was worried that if somebody that was newer or had a lower understanding of the product picked up my ticket, if I didn't document properly, they would take it in a whole new direction and cause me more problems, which happened. It has happened. Or I'd have a hard time taking a vacation because I'd come back and all of my tickets would be like that, right? Of people taking things in a direction I wasn't planning on taking, or people that just couldn't do the work because, if I hadn't documented properly, they couldn't carry on with it. They'd be starting over. So I came from that of you document, and you over document. I always look at it as like I document like I want the business to have continuity if I was hit by a car tomorrow, right? Like I because that allows me to take a vacation and just like actually take a vacation and not work.
That's a really good point. Yeah, that way you don't have to suffer. And some people enjoy that, so I'm not going to rule them out. They like being the center of attention. Everybody calls me to solve problem XYZ. That ain't me, Keith. If you're going to try to call me at 2 a.m. on any night, you're probably either going to get a obliterated John or a angry John, and neither of which wants to deal with you.
I want to be able
Keith, of course, but
I want to be able to go relax on a beach without having to answer a work question.
Right, yeah, and
documentation allows that.
And to your point, Keith, like one thing that I think is getting missed, and I know a lot of people want to jump steps in their career. I always wanted to too, right? Why can't I just be the boss? I got it all figured out. Sometimes in the most, and Keith doesn't like this word I use frequently, mundane tasks, you learn good discipline about that. And, it's painful sometimes. Why do I got to document this? Why do I got to do that? But in retrospect of careers, and Keith's kind of admitting it now, you learn the foundations that'll bring you farther in the future. I feel like I'm harping and preaching. But in all reality, it's true. I know the foundations of my career were built on that. Why do I got to do this thing? But as you do it, you start to understand why as your career evolves, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, you wouldn't know it by my job, but I hate writing. I detest writing. Absolutely. I have to force myself, like a child begrudgingly doing their homework is me when I have to sit down and write. I don't like it. I've been told that I'm good at it. I don't like doing it. But it is necessary, and my God, has it made me a lot of money over my career being able to write. Being able to document and write it's been a huge asset for me because I create collateral. I even got a job because of collateral that I created, right? I went to an interview and I talked about this before on the show, created a white paper around what it was that the company did. And that helped me, eventually get a job.
I love it, Keith. So, just to highlight that a little, I am better at spoken word. Anybody who's ever seen me text or write, it's like a third grader is like sending you a message. I am better at spoken word. But the key is like once I took the time, to your point, Keith called me earlier, and I was writing on my whiteboard. Don't look at my spelling because it's atrocious, but I had to write it out. Doing that has taken me farther than anything else. So to highlight Keith's point, even though it sucks, man, documentation it's hard. It's not easy for me. Trust me. It will take you where you need to be.
I will say the more that I do it, the easier it does get to do, writing in general and documentation specifically. I feel like the more you do it, especially if you see like positive results from it, then it's more encouraging.
Yeah.
John, it's that time of the episode. So we let's see, what do we talk about here? So we talked about documentation during discovery and during several of the meetings that you're having. A lot of that stuff's done in the CRM where you're just kind of writing down what you talked about, including pain, and including, speaking of not being able to read your own handwriting, I can't even read my own notes, but yeah, being able to document pain. Also, we didn't talk about this, but you also have to document the different parts of MEDIC if you're following that framework, which even if you're not formally following it, you probably should be to help, try and qualify deals for yourself. But you should be documenting all of that in the CRM. That's going to be the thread that runs through all of the different sales process. And you can use that when you're creating your POC documentation, which is ultimately going to set scope. And it's going to walk through all the different use cases that you're going to test out. And it's going to be an agreement between you and the customer that, as long as both people hold up their end of the deal and you both agree that it's successful and that, you can get sales terms worked out, then they're going to buy, then that's all good. John, what do you got to share from this episode?
Yeah, man, the big ones, right? So document everything. I know it's painful, but documenting things early on in the sales process, like during discovery, will help you map out your keys to success, right? A path to it, especially in POCs. My job has always been a POC specialist, man. I am a king of that. What you want to do is take that heavy lifting and hard work off your buyer. Document the artifacts they need to sell whatever you're selling. You are doing them a favor by documenting and, creating this artifact of success criteria, screenshots, everything else that can help them go sell. And you're doing the hard work for them. It's not hard work for you. You have a repeatable process, rinse, lather, repeat. You're showing them a new way and a better way how to buy something. So it's worth the effort.
Yeah. So I don't think that I really don't have much more to say on that. And it's just really because of time, right? We've come again at 30 minutes. Man, did we come through it quickly as I go through my documentation on this episode. But yeah, documentation, super important. Next week, you can tune in. We're supposed to have a guest on it's an author. He's going to be on to talk about his book on soft skills, I think, for technical folks, which is
Jenny.
Yeah. So, you've spoken to him before.
Of Hirschevek fame.
Oh, you worked for the Hirschevek Group.
Yes.
I did not know that. Hirschevek Group's a security group. For the general public, they may know the name Robert Hirschevek from Shark Tank. Robert Hirschevek owns Hirschevek Group. And our guest next week apparently worked for him. So that's interesting. We may ask him some questions about that off the record. As security guys, I'm interested. I don't know that our audience would be. So it's either going to be him or that doesn't work out. For next week, we do have a regular show planned where we'll be talking about navigating the challenges of POCs, proofs of concept, which I think this documentation conversation helps set us up for because we started talking about this POC doc, which I kind of want to dive into that and just kind of more tactics and techniques that you can use in POCs. If you enjoyed this week's episode, please like, share, subscribe, tell your friends about us. You can get links to wherever we are, and we're on pretty much every podcast platform. I can't think of any that we're not on. We've got links to all of those, plus our YouTube page on our website. If you go to demogodspod.com, that's demogodspod.com. If you have questions for us or think you'd be a good guest for the show, you can email us at demogodspod@gmail.com. That's demogodspod@gmail.com. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and I look forward to next week when we're either talking more about POCs or we'll talk to our author on soft skills. Join us here on Altar of the Demo Gods.